Hello and welcome back to Blue Tinted Glasses. Today's video is an opposition preview. It's the first opposition preview of the season. It is, of course, going to be about a match against Tottenham Hotspur on Monday night. I am joined, glad to say that I'm joined by Jack from the Irish Hotspur. Hello, Jack. How you doing?
Doing all right. Looking forward to the madness of Premier League football again. We're descending into that chaos. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to leave, obviously, the link in the description for your Twitter and the YouTube channel as well. So we've just filmed an opposition preview over there, so you can go and have a listen to that as well. Let's get into it, Jack. So I want to start with Tottenham's preseason. I'll be honest, I haven't read much into it or heard much about it. So can you let me know how it's gone and also a bit about the signings that you've made as well?
Yeah, in terms of the preseason, it's been kind of you can almost tie together the signings and preseason, where Spurs, in kind of true Spurs fashion, have left a bit of their signings to kind of the later end of the transfer window, at least the important ones, like Dominic Solanki, for example. And then also we've had a lot of important players that played in the Copa America as well as the Euros come back very, very late. So we've had kind of a weird team that we've been fielding, especially in the back line in this preseason. We had Archie Gray and Oliver Skip playing as center backs for the majority of our preseason games. And luckily for us, and maybe not so much for you guys, that actually probably won't be our back line coming up against you guys on Monday. And this preseason, in kind of true Spurs fashion, we often go over to Korea now to both kind of engage with the fan base that we have over there, but also I think to get in some good kind of hot, warm kind of summer training into our
Yeah.
legs as well. And I think it's a good place for that. And it's a good place commercially for us. And it's just a huge fan base out there. And we did all right. We ended up actually conceding more goals than I expected to, I think, a Korean all star team, as well as a Japanese team, Vissel Kobe, who I think at one point were maybe the J League champions, the previous season. And we looked all right against both those teams. There were a lot of positives to take from it. Some of the negatives were the fact that we still looked kind of open in transition or looked open to the counterattack. And then also as well, there were some moments where I just think in general, Spurs can take a lot of risks kind of playing out from the back. And we end up making mistakes in that regard. And we kind of have this sort of ebb and flow or kind of this fluctuation in our play where all of a sudden, we're all over you and it looks like we're going to score 5, 6 goals. And then in periods, we kind of look like that, we're about to hand over kind of the game to the opposition. So it was a strange one this preseason. I think for the most part, mostly positives. Definitely looked like it was more for just getting fitness into our legs. And we only got to see some of our better players towards kind of the very end of the preseason against Bayern Munich. And against Bayern Munich, for the most part, we were pretty outplayed in those 2 games with
Yeah.
Vincent Kompany's team. They ended up playing a very physical game against us. There was actually a lot of fouling, a lot of kind of just physicality from the Bayern team. There were even some points where players were locking horns and locking heads and stuff. So it wasn't even like a real preseason game. It had a bit of a bite to it, had a bit of an edge to it, really, which was a surprise. And Spurs, I think, kind of ended up sort of recovering in the second half in both of those performances. But if you did want to watch back the highlights or if you have any of the footage of those 2 games against Bayern Munich, we were pretty outplayed, I'd say, in the first half of both of those games. And we struggled with Bayern's press, but then we also struggled with some of the transitions that Bayern made against our own press. They actually bypassed our midfield pretty easily. And they at one point looked like they could have scored 3, 4, 5 goals against us. So it was a mixed bag of a preseason where you don't want to read too much into it, but
Mm.
as content creators, we only have so much to work with. And we do end up sometimes reading a bit too much into it. And so I think there were positives, there were negatives. The big thing for Spurs, though, is that we do have a huge core of young players that have come through from the 16-year-old, Mikey Moore, who's supposed to be our kind of like our Lamine Yamal, who's,
Yeah.
even capable of like displacing Brennan Johnson, it looks like at one point this season. He really is that good. We signed this Swedish kid named Lucas Bergvall. He's supposed to be very talented. Of course, Archie Gray, who you might know about from the championship as well. And then some other kind of young players who definitely have a strong chance of getting some minutes this season. Probably were our best players in that
Yeah.
preseason. It wasn't as much the senior players. And funny enough, some of the guys, lastly, who I'll add, like maybe James Maddison or Brennan Johnson, some of our regular first team players, they kind of struggled in the preseason for the most part. So a mixed bag for us, I'd say.
Well, you just mentioned James Maddison. I want to touch on him quickly because, the start of last season, you saw James Maddison for his brilliance that he does have. Leicester fans for the last 3-4 years have always known James Maddison as a half a season player, and I believe that Tottenham fans found that out last year. So I was speaking to my friend Matt Hayes, who's a Tottenham fan, and he said that he doesn't think James Maddison will start on Monday. What do you think to that? Do you agree, or do you think he has to be in the lineup?
I think Ange has been pretty loyal to him as well as Brendan Johnson. And I think that's because they were technically his signings. At least that's what we were told, as James Maddison was one of them who he was really confident in. And then kind of towards the later end of the season, even after the injury, Ange did start pulling him early. He would continue to start him, but he kept pulling him early in the second half. And then something similar with Brendan Johnson, where he does kind of like to persist with them. He likes to start them, but ends up taking them off quite early in games. And I'm curious that you say that with James Maddison, because myself, as well as my partner Dave on the Irish Hotspur, we've been very critical of him this last season because we brought him in for a pretty big fee. Technically, he was supposed to replace the creativity side of Harry Kane's game. I mean, he's wearing the number 10. He was kind of brought in to be kind of that guy that could dictate the play and just be that creative threat in that number 10 role for Ange. And he's just done it in patches for us, where he was sensational in the first 10 games. And then towards the latter end of the season, was kind of missing a lot of shots, gets the ball stuck under his feet. He does tend to kind of lack in the press as well, where he's not as good as some of the other players in our team and kind of getting up and down the pitch. That could also have to do with the injury that he suffered. And he had a very mixed bag of a season. And kind of towards the end, where Spurs were really struggling, I think a lot of our criticisms actually were put on James Maddison for just kind of going missing, it felt like, in the later end of the season.
Well, it sounds just like the year we got relegated. I mean, James Maddison that season was phenomenal for majority of it. He was the reason we weren't down by March, February. It went down to the last day. I think he scored against you as well that season, actually, earlier
Scored a
on.
great goal.
Yeah, and then the second half of the season, again, as always happens with James Maddison, for some reason, he just dropped off. I remember him taking a penalty off Yuri Tielemans in a game against Everton 4 games before the end of the season, and he missed it. And
wow,
he got a lot of criticism for that. And that goal would have kept us up in the Premier League. So I think the majority of Leicester fans will look back on James Maddison's time at Leicester with fond memories, but you just can't ignore sometimes the fact that I think his middle name's Arthur, so I always used to call him James Arthur Season Maddison. So there's one for you to use in the future. But yeah, it's interesting to hear obviously your take on him and what you think to him. So obviously going into the game on Monday night, Leicester fans are very nervous, worried about it just because of how bad we think we are. We honestly believe we're terrible. What are your thoughts going to it? Obviously, hearing that from me alone must make you confident. But taking my thoughts out of it, are you confident into the first game of the season?
I'm kind of confident because Steve Cooper is now your manager, who we did quite
Yeah.
well against last season. I think Steve Cooper, I'm not sure how you feel about him, but I was not really, when he first came in with Forest, he was given a lot of good PR about that team. And then when he did actually come into the Premier League, I wasn't really seeing, where all that PR had come from and all that good press that he had. I actually thought a lot of his football was quite negative. And, that's totally fine if you're a team that's struggling for survival. But then in the second season, his team looked even worse and kind of was like playing in the dark ages. It felt like, the way that he would just put every man behind the ball, look to kind of just hit it long, get it launched type of, style, and hope that they could catch a team out from either a set piece or just any little bit of luck. And Spurs actually, for the most part, did struggle against low block teams last season, but we did do pretty well against Steve Cooper's teams on both occasions. And I'm actually quite confident because of that, because of all the managers that we've come up against, there are some who, for a little bit, it kind of looked like they had Ange figured out. I'm not sure if that was the case with Steve Cooper. I think he actually looked pretty tactically outclassed by Ange. And then also now that we have 2 very big strikers to kind of, play against these low blocks with, we don't have to play Sonny through the middle. I think there's a very good chance that we'll probably have well over 70% possession against you guys. And if you haven't been defending that well, from what I can tell, wasn't the best. I watched one of your preseason games against Lens. just recently out in France. And I must be honest, it did remind me the shape, with everybody sitting behind the ball and, just the constant pressure that they put you under. It kind of reminded me of our performance against Forest a couple of times last season with Steve Cooper. I think we played Nuno the other time, but the first time we played Steve Cooper, it was a 2-0 or something like that. I forget the exact score line, but it felt like a very in control, kind of you knew you were going to get 3 points type of
Yeah.
performance. And I feel that way again here. I'm not sure if we're going to win by threes and fours, but feels like a game where Spurs are going to get, probably the win. And will probably make Leicester look like a team that's just trying to, hit a team on the counter in any hopes that they can. But yeah, I'm not too confident in Steve.
Well, what I'll say to that is, I think Nottingham Forest at times under Cooper, they were actually quite good on the counter. We're really not, we're struggling to, once we break through the first line, we struggle from there on, and we give the ball away pretty quickly after that. So, that could change if we bring we're after a striker, we're after a number 10. We've brought in Buenanotte from
Oh,
Brighton,
yeah.
who's an exciting one on loan. So he might improve things in the final third, but at this time it's not looking good. I want to just also touch on Dominic Solanki. Your thoughts on his signing, because Leicester fans, a bit like Harry Kane was at Tottenham, he always used to love a goal against us. Solanki is the same. Are you happy with that signing despite the cost?
Very happy with it. I think with the cost, it's more a reflection of the homegrown market at this point in time, where he is a very talented homegrown player that did just come off of a pretty much one of the best seasons you could have. No disrespect to Bournemouth, but for a club like Bournemouth, I don't know if he
Yeah.
could really have a better season than he did. I think he was the top goal scorer outside of the top four of, any club and any striker. I think he only had like 3 fewer non-penalty goals than Holland or something like that, which is again just very eyebrow raising. And he looks like a guy that basically would do what Richarlison had done, where Richarlison had about a month or so when Sonny was gone off in the Asian Cup, and he ended up sort of scoring. I think it was like 10 games in a row or something like that for Richarlison. And the big problem with Richie was he's just not consistently fit. And so we were missing that focal number 9, that focal striker. And Solanke looks to be basically Richarlison with a much better injury record. And he does know how to press, knows how to work hard for the team. That's important in this system. And he does have very good hold up play by the looks of things. And that's basically what Ange is looking for. He doesn't need the striker to be that involved in the build-up play, but he does need him to kind of offer that physical side that a big tall striker should. And I'm really excited about Solanke on a number of reasons. And he does kind of look like he's coming into his own now. Like I feel like we have to look at the difference between the Solanke of old versus the Solanke of now. And he does look to be a very kind of confident player who's all of a sudden kind of figured out his game. Maybe that's thanks to Gary O'Neill, during his time with Bournemouth or under Scott Parker, and also probably due to maybe his time with Iraola. He's just starting to figure
Yes.
things out, and I'm really excited actually by the signing. And also maybe the fee probably had to do with how much he was worth to Bournemouth, not as much as what he was worth to Spurs. So if we really wanted him, I think Bournemouth were going to probably just give us, a big price because he's obviously very valuable to them, and they definitely did not want to let him go. And in true Spurs fashion, we kind of just wait till the very, very end and then usually steal a player from a club that's desperate not to lose them, and kind of true Daniel Levy style.
Yeah, I was going to say Bournemouth. I mean, with the fee getting that much, he's probably playing Levy at his own game there, aren't they? So, all right. So on to the actual game. Obviously, we've mentioned Solanke, Maddison. Who else is after what you've seen in preseason and stuff like that? Who going into Monday night are you do you think Leicester fans should keep an eye on and think, he's going to be dangerous?
This might be an unoriginal thing to say, but now that Sonny is back on the left wing, I'm actually really excited to see him once again, because the majority of last season he did have to play as a striker, and we sort of found out that Sonny just isn't as good as maybe some might have originally thought playing as a striker, because when you come up against low block teams, there isn't really any space to run him behind, and that's what really makes him such a good player. If you are going to play him through the middle, is that he's one of the fastest on the pitch, makes really good runs, times his runs really well, and as we know, is a very good finisher. It's just that if you're coming up against a low block defensive side, you are going to have to just sort of stand around in the penalty area and wait for your chance to come to you. And he just didn't really suit his game. I don't think it's where his type of movement really suits him. And now that he's back out on the left wing where he can take on fullbacks, whip in crosses, cut inside, have shots, I'm actually really excited about Sonny because Solanki is going to be a threat for you guys. I think Maddison, of course, coming up against his former team, if he does start, could be a threat against you guys. But now that Sonny gets to play in what I think is his best position, where he technically thrived with Harry Kane, was on that left wing, I think we'll start to see kind of the best of Sonny again. And now I think he's 32, maybe 31. So we're starting to kind of see the end of maybe his career in the last 2 or 3 years or in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think this is a great opportunity to kind of see vintage Son HeungMin again out on that left wing. And it might sound unoriginal, but for context, he barely played on the left wing last season and he just didn't look himself out there. Whereas now I think he'll start to look a lot better on the left wing.
Well, that takes us on to the score predictions. So I know we have just discussed it. I've gone 3-1. I think Tottenham will win 3-1. And what are you saying for it?
I share a 3-1 with you because at the end of the day, like I said in the preseason, we still concede goals quite randomly, and we do at times can look a bit leaky out from the back from either transitions or from just kind of playing out from the back. We tend to make mistakes, and I wonder if Leicester, because it's the first game of the season, I know you guys are nervous, but in true kind of first game of the season style, there might be an unexpected sort of I don't know, kind of whatever peg in the script or whatever the term is, where something unexpected could happen. And I wonder if Leicester might actually, I know you didn't think they would, but I wonder if Leicester might score the first goal maybe early or something like that from a set piece. We're very vulnerable from those. And but then Spurs just kind of go on, start to panic, and then just go on and kind of overwhelm the Leicester side. And, we go on to win 3-1. So I'm going to share that prediction with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know how funny football is. Crazy things can happen, and you never know. People say not to read too much into preseason. When you've been as bad as Leicester have, it's hard not to look into it that way. But you never know. Leicester could turn up and surprise everybody and get the win. I can't see it, which is why I think we agree on the 3-1. Thank you very much for joining me on the channel. Much appreciated. Hopefully, we'll see you very soon for the return leg. I can't remember when it is, the return fixture. I'm not entirely sure, but hopefully we can get you back on the channel for that one.
Looking forward to it, and best of luck to the season for you guys.
Yeah, good luck from Tuesday onwards. not Monday. All right, thank you all. Cheers for watching. Take care.
Thank you, guys.